So, what other sort of changes have you seen in the industry in the time you've been?
Well, a huge amount of, technical changes. For example, I mentioned the turntables, the skid-starting turntables, hanging onto them and taking them up to sound and then letting them fly and all that sort of stuff. The speed changes on the turntables. And then we went into the pulse tapes, pulse cassettes, where they queued themselves up, which was a huge advantage. And then, of course, we've gone from there to CDs and now on hard drives. So we don't work nearly as hard in that sense as we used to.
Do you enjoy it more now, or did you enjoy it more then?
Well, I don't really have any preference. It's you just progress, you go with the flow. It is easier now, but I mean, you have other things to worry about now that you didn't have then, I suppose. But it was a much more physical way of working back in, say, the 50s or 60s. Though obviously it's not like shearing sheep. It wasn't hard like that.
The station moved a few years ago.
Not very far, though. I mean, we've only gone from probably a move of, how shall I say, about 50 feet, a long putt. Just about a long putt from where we are now to where we used to be.
So it's only a small move. So why did it move?
Well, the old building was, getting to be quite decrepit, and new owners decided that we needed a new way of a new building, incorporating an AM and an FM. We were originally just AM, and that's what happened. So, a flash new building with flash new facilities, and the old one was then knocked over.
So they're just out there in the little car park out there?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I always thought that seemed like an odd spot for a heap of vacant land in the middle of buildings there.
Yeah,
I guess it makes more sense now.
Yes, it was. Well, it was originally the complex, which I think was that one was sort of opened in 1930, just before the war, about 1939, and that was purpose built as not just a radio station, but also it had attached as part of it. The manager's residence, which had, I think, 3 bedrooms and a kitchen and a breakfast room and toilets and all that attached. And then that was glued onto, or was part of, actually, the studio complex where you had a main office and a manager's office. And initially there was because in those days you used to do a lot of live stuff, live drama. There was an auditorium with a stage and room for a record library, which was rather large because they used a lot of records and they were quite bulky. So it was a purpose-built radio station residence. That's what was knocked over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's been a bit of change in programming as well then. Back then you would have had all of the various programs that you would have done locally. A lot of
night radio in those days was wall-to-wall transcriptions, things like Bob Dyer and Jack Davey and various serials, So a lot of that stuff, on an average, I suppose, on average night, you'd have probably 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 6 or 7 serials and recorded performances like the Bob Dyer show.
So, do you miss hearing those at night, or were you in bed by the time they were on?
Well, I did do some night radio here at different times here because I used to do breakfast, but occasionally I do a night. Yeah. No, but they were interesting. And the thing was, I remember interviewing Gwenny Plum years ago, the Australian actress, a lovely lady. She's passed on now, but talking to Gwenny, and she was telling me about what it was like being an actor in those days, because she was a very versatile actress. I still use that archaic term. They're all actors now, and she was an actress. Anyway,
I think that's good. I like the terms actor and actress.
Yeah.
I've never really thought of calling female actors actresses as actors.
You only have to look at some of the European languages. There are masculine and feminine still, and they haven't changed. But getting back to Gwenny, I mean, she told me that she was doing a lot of transcription work, and she said her normal day was she'd get to she was recording for Grace Gibson up in Sydney. She'd get to the studio, say 8:30 in the morning, and she said they knock off all the quickies. Various serials, And she said quite often they were overwritten or underwritten. And she said the producer through his little glass panel in the production studio next door would be making signs at the throat cutting. You're going to, it's got to be cut. And she said you'd be jumping lines and ad-libbing your way to the final. And he said, and on the other hand, she said, on the other hand, it might be underwritten and he'd be making stretch. So she said you then ad-lib and make the lines longer to accommodate the time. But then she said we did those with very little rehearsal, and she said we just quickly read through the script and make the breathing sign where they had to breathe. So she said with the serious stuff, the big money stuff, Lux Theatre and all that sort of stuff, she said we would rehearse those. And I've seen them work too. It's quite interesting. They'd be working on what they used to call a cannonball microphone, which I don't think is in use anymore. It'd be facing upwards, and the cast would be walking around like, how shall I say, almost like a table tennis players walking around the microphone. And as they finished their page, they dropped the page on the floor, away from the microphone so it didn't make any swishing sounds. It's quite funny to watch them work, actually. They'd be throwing the script pages away. Yeah.
Oh, I suppose in a way you have a similar system in your studio there with the papers moving from one side of the desk to the other as you're done with them. But
and of course, out of Gwenny Plum's era, the pre-war era, after the war, there was a huge number of Australian performers in Britain. And one of the reasons was that they had to be so damned versatile that there was a lot of work going with the BBC and over in Britain, and there were a lot of people like Bill Kerr, Gwen Plum, they all worked over there, and they could do anything because they'd been doing it for, with very little preparation for years. Yeah, it's quite an interesting change. Well, that was radio production back in those days.
So these days, apart from doing breakfast, you're also doing copywriting for the station. Did you always do the copywriting?
Yeah, I used to do a lot of copywriting and other things, like something that you'd have to prepare something like we did a couple of radio serials which we wrote here, actually. We had a lot of fun doing those. I remember one thing we did called The Lone Stranger, which was an incredibly long and unusual sort of serial which involved a ticket of leave man who'd been sent out to San Francisco by his wealthy British parents. They wanted to get rid of him because he was an embarrassment, and we had an adventure which went all the way through America and wound up in a gold mine in Arizona. And the way we did that was everybody in the building used to get a part. Whoever was there. And surprisingly enough, there was a lot of talent we didn't know that sort of turned up. Interesting. Talking about production and what we used to do, particularly back in say in the 50s in Mildura, things used to be announced with a gong, well, at least a xylophone type thing, tones. And so if you did a funeral announcement, you do 3 on the lower register, bong, 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 bong. Here is a funeral announcement, and you'd read that without trying to sound, holier than thou. And various things. You'd do your call sign, 3MA, your broadcasting service, and all that sort of stuff. And the old manager I used to work with, Max Foley, up in Mildura, said that a BBC bloke came out. He was always a leg-pulling sort of a bloke, so I was never sure if this was a true story. But he said a BBC fellow was one of the bigwigs came out here in the 30s. And had done he'd been all over Australia, and he wound up in Mildura, and he walked in the studio this day, and the fellow was banging a gong and doing his thing, and he said when they got music on the air, he said to this bloke, he said, tell me, he said, what exactly do you do here? And he said, well, I do announcing, as you can see. He said, I read commercials. He said, I write commercials. He said, I write a bit of news. He said, I compile my program from the library, and that very extensive library. And he said, yes. He said, my God, he said, you fellows are versatile. He said, you're a newsreader, you're an announcer. He said, you're a music expert, and you have to play a bloody xylophone.
It would be funny if at the train stations where they still use the xylophone to announce the train on platform 3 goes. It'd be interesting if they still had someone there playing the xylophone to do that. But alas. Would a xylophone be the perfect addition to your studio?
Actually, we used to have one here, and I don't know what happened to it. I think somebody must have souvenired it when we stopped using it. I've never seen it again. It was here in the cupboard, but I don't know where it is now.
But if it was still here, do you think you'd pull it out occasionally and just do a few bongs in the morning just to...
I'm sure Andy would. He'd be into anything.
Yeah, I can just picture Andy using his xylophone for production.
Andy is one of our production... Woody is our production king, actually, so I should tell your listeners that.
Yes, the chief and senior production engineer of the station.
And everything else, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What else could we find that's changed around here and over the time you've been here?
Well, it's less staff, actually, because a lot of stuff is networked in our sister station, Wangaratta. They do stuff for us and we do stuff for them. And, there's been an attrition, employment attrition of jobs, not sacking anybody, but as people have resigned, they haven't been replaced for one reason or another, but because of the things you can do with technology now.
So do you miss having all of the extra people around, or do you think it's...
Well, you get used to it, I suppose. You know, it's one of those gradual things that sort of that happens, and by the time it happens, you've sort of got used to it, really.
Does the station seem less lively to you with less people around, or...?
Well, radio itself is not as lively as it was because for reasons I've explained, that the way you work. I mean... It's much more a sedentary. Well, it's always been sedentary, but a much more relaxed sort of way of working now.
I suppose the question there then is, if all the people hadn't moved on, if they were still here, do you think it would make a difference to the way you work?
Well, I don't think there's anything. The sort of things they used to do, they don't have to do anymore anyway. So it wouldn't sort of nothing's actually missing. It's just a totally different technique and a set of circumstances and different equipment, which doesn't require that many people to work it.
True. You've been doing breakfast here for 49 years now.
Yeah.
Can we look forward to another 49 years?
Well, I don't know. People keep saying to me, when are you going to retire? And I said, well, is that a hint? No. Well, mostly they say, no.
Has anyone ever said yes?
No, I haven't. Well, it'll happen, I suppose. But no, as I said before, it's not like cutting timber. It's not like doing road work. It's not like shearing sheep. Yeah, physically speaking, it's quite easy, providing you can talk. Your mind isn't too scrambled, and your memory's working, and a few other things, and you've got a voice. Yeah, it's not that hard. As my father used to say to me years ago, why don't you get a proper job?
And what was your response?
You don't work in radio, Dad. You don't know the half of it.
Yeah, it is quite a skill-filling 3 hours every morning, even if you do have a lot of records to play and there's a lot of commercials there. But
yeah,
it still is. There is still a fair bit of skill there. I mean, people have said to me a few times, well, if it's the only station in town, or in this case, there's only sort of two local stations, I suppose. People don't have a choice, but they do have a choice. They either listen or they don't.
Yeah.
So you still have to find something to keep them engaged of a morning, and to be able to do that for 3 hours a day for as long as you've been doing it there is quite a bit of skill there.
Well, I've always worked on the basis of don't do something that's too lengthy or too complicated. It might suit you, but it probably won't suit a lot of the audience. So keep it short, and if you haven't got anything intelligent or interesting to say, play a record.
So is that a tip for up-and-comers?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is you've got to enjoy what you're doing. And that's a big plus. Enjoy what you're doing. You've got to be disciplined to a certain extent. I know I've known quite a few undisciplined radio announcers in my time. You've probably known a few too. Enjoy what you're doing. Try to be happy. I've always been against being negative on the air, because I figure that, for argument's sake, if you play a song and you say, "Oh, that's a rotten record, wasn't it?" Why play it? That will be my reaction as a listener. Well, what's he playing it for if he doesn't like it, know? So don't be negative. Be upbeat. Be happy. Try to enjoy what you're doing and let it shine through. and don't bore anybody if you can avoid it.
So you wouldn't recommend reading a 5,000-page novel of a morning to your listeners?
or even a joke that lasted 3 minutes.
Yes, because I suppose the trouble with I find it with a lot of the longer jokes is even if they only go for 30, 40 seconds, if I miss the first line of it, I have no idea what's going on.
It's like Columbo. If you miss the first few minutes, you don't know what the hell's going on.
And then, so for the next 30 seconds, it's, well, I'm sure something's going on here, but I don't know why I'm listening to it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So keep it short and don't bore anybody. And it also, I find it helps me anyway. I don't know if it helps anybody else, but it's quite useful at times to have a trigger to whatever it is you're going to say. So you might be able to come out of a record which has already established something and then to follow on with either a joke or a comment which goes in with the record you just played.
You're quite well known for some of your jokes.
It's it's an annoying thing in some ways because people tell me a joke and I've heard it. Because once you start doing them, you start trawling for jokes, which you can use on radio, because there are a lot you can't. Somebody with all the goodwill in the world will start to tell you a joke and say, I know that one, or I know a variation of that one, and you get to be a bit of a curmudgeon, sort of thing. Oh, he's a miserable blighter. He won't let me tell him a joke. But it is a bit awkward there because you've seen so many. And really speaking, I don't know how many jokes there are, but there are hosts and hosts and hosts of jokes which are variation on a joke. And, so I'm a bit annoying to some people like that when they tell me. I said, I know that one. Heard that. It goes, sons, did you? Oh. And they're crestfallen,
Do you ever indulge people? They're telling you a joke that you've heard 15 times before, and you just sort of stand there and pretend that
I have done that. I have done that, and try to be, well, that's funny, yeah. Depends on the occasion, and who it is.
And I suppose, depending on your reaction there, they might think, he didn't think that was as funny as I thought it was.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever run out of the jokes?
Oh, well, there's plenty of jokes out. It's quite hard to find original ones, though. But they're there. Just if you haven't got them, don't muck about. Do something else.
Yeah.
Bit of information that they might like to hear. Like, for example, today I've been reading about all the foodstuffs that are dangerous. Like, did you know this? That the pips in an apple on their own, if you ate a pip, it's not a problem. There was a man in England who lusted after apple pips, would you believe? And he kept collecting them until he got an egg cupful. And then he ate the egg cupful and it killed him. Because in quantity, there's a poison in there. Same with, for example, some almonds. Bitter almonds have got a lot of cyanide in them. This is all, I'm full of knowledge because I've just read this. Rhubarb stalks, lovely. Rhubarb leaves, poisonous. Potatoes, the same. If you've got a potato with green on it, don't eat the green bits because it's got nasty stuff in it. And don't eat potato stalks or potato leaves because they're poisonous. Same with tomatoes. So there you go. Those sort of things.
Reminds me of when I was about 3 or 4 years old and I would refuse to eat the vegetables on my plate.
Yep.
Especially the corn. The corn on the cob. Hated corn on the cob when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And my dad would always say to me, well, it's going to sit there until it turns green and you're still going to eat it.
Good on you, Dad.
Yeah. And I'd turn around and say, but it'd be poisonous by then. Well, you should eat it before then, shouldn't you? I think it worked. I still don't particularly like corn on the cob, but learnt to eat my vegetables.
Yeah, and they're good for you, providing they're washed properly, because that was another thing they said. A lot of salad accumulates nasty things like salmonella and things like that. So they've got to be washed properly, even if it is greens your mother wants you to eat, broccoli, salad things, they've got to be properly prepared.
Dixie's cooking show in the morning.
Absolutely.
So you would have accumulated a fair bit of these statistics and bits of interesting information and trivia over the years.
Well, my old granddad used to say, if you stay awake, you'll learn something new every day, and it's pretty true, I reckon.